This project is a roundhouse, the Walthers 3-stall modern roundhouse. Come along as we build and detail it. We'll start with the floor. While despruing the parts, the first thing we notice is this kit has some pretty large and unwieldy pieces. The sections get glued together, which makes it obvious they need filling. Lots of filling. And sanding. I think the extension works better as a small machine shop rather than an extended stall, so it gets plugs glued in like the shorter stalls and the track grooves filled. Then it gets coated with my favorite concrete colored chalkboard paint. We need some rails, so they get pried from a piece of flex track and painted with Tamiya Hull Red. After trimming and filing, they get glued into place. On to the roof supports. We start by adding some wood grain texture, then a base coat of ammo light wood. Next we'll put some wood grain on here. I'm going to use these oils. We've got raw sienna, burnt sienna, burnt umber, Van Dyke brown. The paint gets applied in dots, then blended into a wood grain using a soft brush. The end result is good, but it takes quite a while to dry. The first detail we're going to add is lighting. I designed up some fixtures in Blender based on some pictures of roundhouses, then printed them out. The fixtures get removed from their supports, then we have to desolder all the resistors from each LED. They get threaded through the fixture, then glued in place. We straighten, strip, and cut some wire to make mounting poles, then glue it onto the light fixtures. Then repeat that 15 more times to make a total of 16 fixtures. We prime them red oxide from a rattle can, then do a quick check to see how light tight they are. Turns out not enough, so they get another coat of gloss black, which will make them more opaque and help fill in the ridges from printing. Then they get color, multiple coats of green craft paint. After a few coats of paint, we've got them acceptably green. The last step of painting is a coat of white on the inside of the shade, to both help aid in reflecting light and make it a little more opaque. We drill the mounting holes in the beams, then strip some long pieces of wire to make the conduits that will run power to the lights. Conduit gets bent and glued and bent and bent and bent and glued until it's in its final shape and place. The conduit gets tinned where each light's going to connect to make soldering a little easier. Then each light gets glued in place, making sure to keep the positives on one side and the negatives on the other. The lead wires on the LEDs are far too thin to strip normally, so I burn the insulation off with a torch. Each wire gets soldered to the conduit, and while it only takes a few seconds here, this was by far the most difficult and tedious part of the entire build. It required many attempts to get to the point where all the lights went on and stayed on. After each connection is made, the excess wire is cut off. The flux residue is cleaned off with some isopropyl alcohol to help the paint adhere. Then the conduit gets painted flat black with some enamel. A quick coat of matte varnish ties all the finishes together. We mark holes for the feed wires on the floor, then drill them out. Generous amount of super glue, and then the roof supports get mounted. Walls are next. They get sponged with an assortment of brick colors. I like sponging over painting individual bricks as it replicates the model appearance of the old buildings I use as a reference. Next, we do the mortar lines with thinned out oil paint. I use a light gray rather than white. Making the mortar lines has dulled the paint a little too much for my taste, so I'm going to go over it again with all the colors. The sills get painted with the same concrete colored chalkboard paint that the floor did. Here are the large walls all painted. On to the windows. We start with a coating of hairspray for chipping. Reference photos showed a bluish gray would be a good color, so I mixed some up from craft paint. What is causing this? Well, I know what's causing this because I'm using cheap craft paint. After a quick trip to the hobby store to get some real paint, after finally getting some paint on the windows, I began chipping them using a brush and a toothpaste to scrape some of the paint off, giving a weathered appearance. I discovered that these have a bunch of sinks in them. Sand these back down. We can repaint this. The centers of the chipped areas get filled in with lighter gray paint. The longer the wood's been exposed, the lighter it gets. Here's everything chipped and weathered. Next, we'll add some rust. I'm using AK Rust Effects to add rust to the hinges and other metal parts, and then run the stains down the doors. Not like the way the AK Interactive stuff turned out, and several magic erasers later, most of it is off, and we're going to redo it with oil paints. Some dabs of the oil paint go where we want rust stains, then they get pulled down with a soft brush. I think these look a lot better than the AK stuff. The windows come off the sprue and get ready to be installed. The windows that come with the kit are thick and have a lot of distortion, so we're going to make our own from sheets of acetate. The frames have nubs for aligning the stock windows that come with the kit, so we'll cut them off. Time to install the windows. They get sandwiched between the two halves of the walls, the inner and outer. I guess this is to give it a little cleaner appearance on the inside, but it makes the assembly a huge pain. It was just insane, but it's together. We're going to use 3M Super 77 spray adhesive to attach the acetate. So we're making some masks to make sure the adhesive only goes on the window frames. My thinking is the spray adhesive won't fog the windows like super glue or get everywhere like PVA. Oh, that's obnoxious. Take 2 on gluing in the windows. And let's see if we can hopefully do this without getting everything sticky as hell. And now I'm just hoping to God I sprayed it on the right side of the window. Turns out the spray adhesive had its own set of drawbacks, but in the end it worked out pretty well. The exterior walls get weathering with oil paints. Now it's time to mount the floor to the base. The inspection pits need to have clearance cut for them because they hang below the floor. Got those troughs cut out. Need to put some holes in. The inspection pits get glued to the bottom of the floor. It is located, everything's drilled through. I need to glue it down, weight it down until the glue dries, then come in and touch up and weather. The floor gets weathered, starting with stains in the inspection pit, made with some oil paint thinned down with turpentine. This is where we either get the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. At this point I noticed the back wall and extension didn't have any brick pattern on the joints. This piece creates the pivot pockets for the doors. The door assemblies go on. This is tricky because you have to keep the doors in the frames, get all the pins in all the right slots, get glue on the parts that need glue, and keep it off the parts that don't, so everything still works once it's assembled. The clear story windows go on next. The windows aren't glued to this wall, keeping it removable. 3 short pieces of track get cut, painted, and glued in place at the front of the roundhouse. Landscaping starts with grout, then some real dirt from my backyard. The dirt gets its color evened out with some brown paint, and then we move on to static grass, starting with 2mm length. Then we add some clumps of taller 4mm grass. The tracks get ballast spread, then evened out. The ballast gets fixed using watered-down PVA glue with a little surfactant mixed in, bypassing the typical isopropyl alcohol. Now the roof. We start on the interior with a base coat of the same light wood from ammo that we used on the roof supports. The same dot technique lets us simulate wood grain on the ceiling. Onto the exterior. A test piece using PVA glue and grout gave me the texture I was looking for, so that's what we're going to do here. Unfortunately, on the actual roof, it didn't turn out like it did on the test piece. The brush strokes from the glue showed through, so I wound up stripping it all off. We're going to glue all the panels together before proceeding with finishing the exterior. Attempt 2 at the exterior of the roof is going to use sandpaper. This will also help hold all the panels together because the roof is going to remain removable. After cutting the sheets to size, they get glued down using PVA glue. I had this smokestack bung over here in the same spot because this is for equipment, not for a longer locomotive. Smokestacks are next. They, like every other part of this kit, needed a lot of filling and sanding before they were ready for paint. The smokestacks get sponged with rust colors, lighter at the bottom to darker at the top. The last step was some buff color deposits I saw in all of the reference photos. Then they get glued to the roof. Ground up pastels simulate soot settling on the roof. The last step is gluing the stacks to the top of the roof. The sandpaper roof is not working out. In addition to this giant seam, all of the edges are detaching and curling up before the project's even finished. So it gets removed too, replaced with real dirt from my backyard, held down with a 50-50 mix of PVA glue and water, which turned out really nice. The final step is detailing. I designed a bunch of parts in Blender, 3D printed them, primed them black, and now I'm painting them. We've got workbenches, machine tools, barrels, drums, even stairs, and storage cabinets. This kit was a struggle. Between the age of the molds, the unwieldy construction techniques, the huge panels, my never-ending problems with the roof, and soldering tiny wires that I could never seem to get clean enough, I wasn't sure it would ever come together. But in the end, it finally did. If you liked this video, here's another one you might enjoy. And thanks for watching.